These two silos, in the middle of a cornfield, are all that is left of an amazing story. The story begins with the birth of Frederick E. Murphy on a farm in Wisconsin. Frederick was the son of James and Mary Murphy, and he grew up on the family farm near Hammond, Wisconsin. All 8 of the Murphy children were given a college education, and Frederick was number 6. He chose to attend Notre Dame, where he graduated in 1893. After graduating, Frederick got a job in the press room of the Minneapolis Tribune. He was very ambitious and set out to master every department of the newspaper. In 1895, he had become the superintendent of circulation, and the paper had about 48,000 paid subscriptions. Frederick married Catherine Connolly in 1901, at the age of 28. By 1905, the circulation had risen to almost 93,000, so it had nearly doubled under Mr. Murphy. Murphy brought several new ideas to the Tribune, one of which was staff gatherings to foster the exchange of ideas, as well as to promote loyalty and enthusiasm. In 1907, Frederick was promoted to the head of the advertising department. In this role, he started the Minneapolis Tribune Hustler, a newsletter that encouraged employees in all departments to work together as part of a team. At this stage in his life, he became interested in automobile shows, tours, and competitions. He was one of 19 entries into the Little Glidden car race from Minneapolis to Fargo. Due to this newfound interest, he left the Minneapolis Tribune and got into the automobile business. He started the Frederick E. Murphy Automobile Company in Minneapolis and sold Mitchell motor cars. Later on, he also sold Page luxury cars, the most beautiful car in America. This is a 1914 map of Minneapolis, showing the location of the famed Stone Arch Bridge. This beautiful bridge is a landmark in the Minneapolis area. The Murphy Auto Company was located west of the bridge along Hennepin Avenue. Let's take a closer look at the area within the red rectangle. The Murphy Auto Company was located at the intersection of Hennepin Avenue and 13th Street, which was considered the dealership corridor of Minneapolis at that time. This is a view of the Murphy Auto Company building, which prominently displayed its model automobiles. Here's a view of the inside of the building, where cars were also on display. This is a photo of Murphy's private office and Frederick sitting at his desk. The automotive business must have been good for Frederick as well, as he took out numerous whole-page ads in the Minneapolis Tribune. However, in 1918, his older brother William died. At the Minneapolis Tribune, Frederick had been manager of circulation and advertising, but William was the owner, editor, and publisher. Prior to the Tribune, William had owned the Grand Forks Plain Dealer. Frederick was a workaholic, like his brother, so his doctor suggested he take a break from office work and go farm for a while. It turned out his doctor was the famous William Mayo from Rochester, Minnesota. Dr. Mayo had given his older brother the same advice, but William hadn't listened. Frederick and Catherine packed up their things and moved to Breckenridge, Minnesota, where Catherine's family, the Connollys, owned land. This is a 1903 map of Wilkin County, Minnesota, which shows the city of Breckenridge. Connolly Township was north of Breckenridge, where the Connolly family owned their land. The red dot shows the location of the Connolly farm, which was along the Red River of the north. Let's take a closer look at the area within the red rectangle. This 1903 plat map of Connolly Township shows Annie and Edward Connolly as the landowners, and the farm was called the Arbor Grove Stock Farm. It is likely that Terence and Edward C. were brothers, and in 1903, the land was in the names of Terrence's wife Annie and Edward C.'s son Edward T. Both Edward Connollys had lived at the Arbor Grove stock farm. The farm was named for the thousands of trees that Edward C. had planted over the years. As far as the Terrence and Annie half of the farm, it doesn't appear there was a farmstead on it in 1903. Terrence and Annie were the parents of Catherine Connolly, Frederick's wife. Therefore, when Frederick and Catherine moved to the farm from 1918 to 1921, they likely began to build on their parcel of land. However, Frederick didn't stay beyond the 3 years. As in 1921, he assumed control of the Minneapolis Tribune. In 1921, he would have been 49 years old. When Frederick returned to the big city, he wanted to bring farmers and the residents of cities closer together. So he hired Charles Collison to write agricultural features for the Tribune, stressing that better farming means better business. The Tribune featured hundreds of full-page articles on the value of balanced agriculture. On his farm, he planted miles of trees along his roads, fields, and buildings. He even had a small nursery on his farm for transplanting different varieties of trees. He told farmers that they needed to rotate crops, not just plant wheat every year. Wheat was king in the Red River Valley of the North, and most farmers planted it every year. Finally, he explained that farmers should also raise livestock, partly for their own food. Plus, the waste from the animals could be used as fertilizer on the fields. When the Twin Cities hosted the National Dairy Shows in 1921 and 22, Frederick saw the potential of the dairy cow. The show slogan in 1922, "Prosperity follows the dairy cow," made him want to become more involved in the dairy business. Remember that Frederick and Catherine Murphy now owned the farm north of Breckenridge in Connolly Township. They named their farm the FEMCO Farm, standing for the Frederick E. Murphy Company Farm. This farm actually became known as FEMCO Farm Number 1 because Frederick and Catherine continued to buy additional farms in the area. Remember that Edward Connolly also owned the Arbor Grove stock farm near FEMCO Farm Number 1. This is a 1939 aerial photo of both farms, which were right along the Red River. Let's take a closer look at FEMCO Farm Number 1. This is the same 1939 aerial photo, which shows the trees that were planted along the roads near the farm. There were also numerous shelter belts planted along the north side of the farm to shelter it from cold north winds. This is another aerial photo of the farm taken from the southeast, looking northwest. There were numerous buildings on the farm, including several barns, a house, creamery, and machine sheds. This photo was taken from the east, looking to the west. This shows the house and windmill. Here are the two main barns and the house, two men in the farmyard, and a field with the farm complex in the background. To overlook his entire operation, Frederick picked Frank A. Ludolf, who had worked with Frederick at the Tribune and in his automobile business. He hired Axel Hansen to be the manager of the farms. Finally, Edward H. Meade was selected as the office manager. As mentioned before, the Murphys continued to buy other parcels of land. FEMCO Farm Number 2 was located in Roberts Township, just northeast of Kent, Minnesota. This is a 1939 aerial photo of FEMCO Farm Number 2, where you can see the hundreds of trees and shrubs that were planted around the farmstead. This is a schematic of FEMCO Farm Number 2, with the aerial photo on the left. The most prominent feature was two large dairy barns with twin silos behind them. This is a photo of the barns and silos, and if you look closely, you can see the barn was labeled FEMCO Number 2. Here are some other photos of the barns and silos. There was also a granary to the west of the barns, which is shown in this photo. This is looking at the interior of the granary. Another large building was the sheep barn. This photo shows the outside of the barn, while this photo shows the inside. The hog barn was located furthest from the houses and is shown in this photo. There was also a large machine shed along the main road, shown in this photo. The corn crib was near the hog barn. This building had open spaces in the outer walls to allow air to circulate among the cobs of corn. The main house was located on the west side of the farmstead and is shown in these photos. Dairy barns needed a milk house, and FEMCO Farm Number 2 is no exception. Finally, this is a photo of the fertilizer bin. The layouts of FEMCO Farms 1 and 2 were designed by a professional farm architectural firm, and were very similar. If you put their 1939 aerial photos next to each other, this becomes quite evident. They each had a circular entry road, although the houses were on opposite sides of this road. Finally, both farms had double barns and double silos. These two photos show the double barns and double silos. The double silos appear to be concrete stave silos, with some framework between them, making them look like one big silo. Both featured a granary that looked very similar. However, the house on Farm Number 1 looks a little older in style compared to the house on Farm Number 2. One big difference between the two farms were the enormous double clay tile silos attached to another barn at Farm Number 1. These two silos were built of clay tile block, which made better, drier, and warmer buildings. The block came from the A.C. Oaks Brick and Tile Company of Springfield, Minnesota. Oaks normally labeled his silos at the top with his initials, ACO. If you look back at the aerial photo of Farm Number 1, you can barely make out the words FEMCO Farm. And those are the silos that remain in the cornfield. Stay tuned for the next segment on Frederick E. Murphy and his remarkable story. That concludes the video. Make sure to check out my other YouTube videos and my primary website at mnbricks.com.